Morning, everybody. So as Jonathan said, I'm Jay Koo. I'm the Chief Commerce Officer at TrueCar. Thank you for having me. Thanks to the summit and all the great sponsors for having us. So yeah, just really quick bio about me, because I hate talking about myself. But basically, the last 20 years, I just spent my life getting really good at getting people to buy stuff online. A lot of the stuff that I'm wearing, because who wouldn't wear the free stuff they get? So yeah, so that's kind of been my background. So it's interesting then to think about that as a practice when it comes to automotive, right? And marketplaces in particular. So I'm excited to talk to you about TrueCar. But before I do that, I'll actually talk about other folks. So, and this probably won't be the first slide of logos that you see during this summit, I'm sure, and won't be the last. But so I just want to kind of talk through, like, you'll notice there's none of the other kind of auto sort of marketplaces or sites in this list. But I just want to talk through this because we and myself look at these kind of analogs in a lot of different ways, and everyone who kind of will know who they are. So let me just kind of speak to what we pull away from them and how we look at them and what we learn from them to integrate into our sort of online car buying experience. So first off, so Etsy. So Etsy, as we all know, is really great at creating experiences where you find one-of-a-kind, unique products, not too dissimilar from a VIN or a specific car that really speaks to you, right? And then you think about Airbnb. Airbnb is about finding experiences, great experiences. It's not so much about finding accommodation. At least that's how they position themselves. So what's interesting about that, though, is that while all the experiences may be different in different locations, there is a universally accepted baseline of truth and service that you expect at every single Airbnb for the most part that you go at. Although I'm sure people have horror stories. We'll forget that for now. But there's generally supposed to be a universal sort of standard practice there. Zola, wedding registry site, we look at them very interestingly because at the end of the day, one, you're spending a lot of money. I'm married myself, but someone said to me, we didn't have a wedding because of COVID, but they once said, oh, if you have a wedding, it's like buying basically like, I don't know, a 3 Series and just rolling it into a lake, because that's kind of like what you come away with that years later. But anyway, so for Zola, it's a big purchase, and it's connecting individuals with a vast marketplace of suppliers, vendors, for your wedding that you're spending a lot of money on. Ideally, it happens once. Amazon, best in class in transaction, right? That's what we think about Amazon. It's, you know, a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, they're really good at making that transaction experience seamless. And finally, Yelp, which is all about localization and ultimately connecting with your community and proximity, right? And ultimately the peer reviews in your area that give you that validation. So again, nothing in the auto space for sure, but for us, it's really interesting to think about when you look at all of these platforms, you know, what sort of connects them in a certain way that we look at, that we want to sort of, you know, co-opt from them and utilize and incorporate into our own TrueCar platform? Well, number one is obviously just a great tech stack that connects supply and demand, right? Number two, it's solving the research and discovery challenge, which is quite significant in all of those, right? Number three, it's basically a personalized experience, which we'll talk about a lot, right? But they're really good at knowing who you are and ultimately how to reach you and how to get you through their funnels, right? Number four is connected to ease of transaction, getting you to check out, getting you to buy, right? And then number five is essentially tied to that continual relationship that you have with them thereafter, right? Maybe, again, maybe not for Zola ideally, but for the other ones you would. And lastly, number six is essentially a win-win for the supply side, for the demand side, right? And obviously the marketplace wins as well. So we look at that and we say, okay, well, at the end of the day, why doesn't that exist in that true 360-degree sense for the car industry, the car marketplace? There's a lot of reasons why. I think ultimately what we see today is, you know, and what the legacy of TrueCar in history has been, is that a very robust listing platform that is really, really optimized and really good to get you to come to the site, generate a lead to a dealer, and then hand it off to the dealer for you to ultimately close that transaction, right? And that's sort of something where, you know, is unique in that it's different than obviously all those other marketplaces that we looked at. And so for us, it's ultimately thinking about the question again, like, why can't this be built, and why hasn't it been built, and why is it more simple for the car marketplace? Well, because buying a car looks like this. So we call this internally Candyland. It's really difficult. It's really difficult. There's a lot of second guess. It's an emotional roller coaster. We've all been on it. First off, you say, like, should we get a car? Well, you know, our daughter's going to college. maybe we need to wait. Got a tuition bill to pay now, right? Well, if we do get one, is it new? Is it leased? Is it used? Is it CPO? Is it financed? Is it cash, right? And then ultimately, like, well, we got to go test drive. Let's go test drive 3. Well, I didn't like the salesperson. Or, like, maybe we should get an EV. I don't know, but EVs are expensive. And then that doesn't that doesn't even include the whole process of once you decide the car that you want, right? Being in the F&I box, going through this whole process, you doubt yourself, then you're really excited. Ultimately, it's this whole thing, how much is my current car worth? It's really hard. It's really hard. And it ain't like booking a room or Airbnb, right? It's not any means like that. So there is that inherent difficulty in it. And so it's no wonder then that when you have to navigate such a labyrinth, or when consumers do, that when you think about all those elements, how do you incorporate Candyland into an online marketplace for car shopping? Well, we think we can, so I'm here. So we think we can. So obviously, TrueCar has been known historically as a listing site where we've generated leads for a network of upwards of 10,000 dealers across the country. But really, in the last 2.5, 3 years, we've started making a significant investment in building a true two-sided marketplace, okay, that we think will differentiate, and we think ultimately where these platforms have to go with where shoppers want to what they want to experience when it comes to buying a car online. So this is our mission: to build and to give our consumers the most personalized and individualized car shopping experience online. Now, we are doing that obviously built on the legacy of what we've had so far, but the challenge and the difficulties, again, it's Amazon and those platforms do a great job of just saying, oh, like so-and-so really likes, this particular brand. Let's just show them similar things. And that's the degree of personalization. Obviously more complex than that, but it's much more direct in that transactional sense. As you know, for auto, it's infinitely more difficult, right? So I'll talk a little bit about sort of how we're doing that, and what different kind of cohorts and segments that we're focused on and how we go about that. So, we find ourselves, or we think of ourselves, well-positioned to build this true dynamic, personalized marketplace because we feel, are some very clear differentiators and some strengths in that we perceive as. So number one, research, which a lot of sites have, a lot of marketplaces, there's a lot of content sites, that does exist for sure. Primarily in the past, we've been very much focused on new inventory, but we've made a concerted effort to focus on both new and used to have all of that available to our customers, our consumers. This one to us we love because, again, if you look at all of those platforms I talked to, online transactability is critical. And especially, I was just saying, people bought homes sight unseen during COVID online. People buy mattresses today, and a lot of us would never thought that would have really happened in the past. But so having that online transaction experience is so critical. That's something we've focused on significantly, and you might have heard of it. It's called TrueCar Plus, TC Plus. And so you see that when you come to the site where there's actually VINs that you can basically check out with online, and we're finalizing the final parts of that, which I'll speak to shortly. But not to belie or neglect our important, very critical dealer network and the ability to still go into a dealer, right? So we call it off-ramps. So ultimately, at the end of the day, like someone, essentially the Home Depot or the IKEA equivalent of, hey, I just want to go to the store to pick it up. Tell me where it is in the store, or I'll buy it and then pick it up in store. So dealer options. So essentially the idea that at any point in time, as you conduct and as you're going through checkout, you can off-ramp to the dealer at any point and continue it from there, right? So that to us is also really critical, giving optionality to the consumer. Trade in or sell, price index, so obviously comparing price to those similar VINs that were purchased around you. Integrated financing, so as a part of TC Plus, again, we're talking about the complexity of car shopping, as we all know. We have a network of 1,500 lenders now, right? So as you're obviously going through the online checkout process, you need to be connected to financing. This is something we focused a lot on and built quite quickly to give you a lot of options in that regard. And then we have an affinity network of about 260 brands and platforms and associations and organizations that we work with, right? AAA, Sam's Club, American Express, Navy Federal, Uber. We power all their buying programs. So this is also critical to us for a couple reasons. One, it's bringing qualified high-intent traffic to TrueCar, people who are like, oh, I get a benefit by shopping through Amex, about $5,000 in post-purchase incentives and offers and services, or Sam's Club and whatnot. So I get that sort of validation as a consumer coming through them to TrueCar. But also, this is where we sort of target a lot of our OEM incentives through private targeted offers through our affinity network. So you get those specifically. TrueCar Military is one that we're incredibly proud of. Mike, our CEO, actually was just at an event in DC where he donated a car to a Gold Star family. So in addition to that, every military member and their families get benefits through TrueCar Military. So that's a part of our affinity network as well. Lastly, the actual true transaction data, right? It's not just about the listing price. It's not just about the MSRP. But what did this car actually get bought for at the end of the day with the negotiations, with the incentives, with the offers, right? That data is gold in a lot of ways for us to power a marketplace platform. It's the equivalent of, in some ways, a Macy's saying, oh, like this shirt actually was bought for $2 cheaper over there, right? But there's power in that, how we utilize that, right? So that true transaction data is also a differentiator for us. So what does that mean as it relates to the individual, right, and personalization? So like I said, every marketplace does an incredible job of sort of knowing who you are, what you're interested in, and how to better serve you in that regard. And I think as we kind of go forward and as we build this marketplace, this is probably the promised land to us in a lot of ways. Because again, the emotional roller coaster that is car shopping is very difficult. And also at the same time, TrueCar is selling to potentially the 17-year-old to the 70-year-old, the 520 FICO to the 800 FICO, right? There's a broad spectrum there. And a one-size-fits-all solution, even though you could navigate millions of VINs, actually doesn't help anyone really in a large part. So the way we think about it is, how quickly, with as many little clicks as possible, can we know as much about you as possible to help you in this shopping journey and experience? So this slide gives you an idea of essentially all the things that we're looking at and measuring and ultimately optimizing for when you come to the site. There's a lot here. But again, it's everything from your potential household income based on the zip code you're in, to did you come from a partner? When you go to the photos, are you sorting and looking at certain color VINs? And then when you do that, when you get to a VDP, are you focusing more on, I don't know, the photos of the leather of the car? Are you more focused on the moonroof? What are you featuring? What are you selecting as far as features for the car? So we're looking at all that, obviously the type of engine, all these different types of parameters that we're looking at for an individual to understand, like, okay, let us help shuttle you through this process so that at the end of the day, you feel like you've matched with the right car. And I think what I've come to learn in my numerous conversations with dealers is that there's an incredible magic that's hard to replicate. Forget the Candyland diagram. Forget the labyrinth of all those choices and doubts. But the matchmaking, to me, that's the magic in a lot of ways of the dealership experience, right? That at the end of the day, you come out of that, and that sales associate is incredibly good at figuring out who you are and what kind of car you should fit into, down to the soft credit check that they do when you hand them your license before a test drive, to sussing you out, asking you questions, right? And that's really hard to replicate online. But we think, based on what we measure and what we see, that as we build this future state marketplace for TrueCar, we're gonna try and bottle that up digitally, right? So let's talk about how we put that into practice for a specific audience segment. So this is one that I'm really passionate about. A lot of the people in the company are really passionate about this. But when we think about, let's go back to that person I mentioned. Again, they're not necessarily the 17-year-old, but let's say there's someone with, let's say, a sub 600 credit score. Okay, this person could be straight out of college, not a lot of credit history. It could be someone that maybe had some hard times. But at the end of the day, it is no doubt that in this country, you need a car to live your life. Get to work, see family, take the kids to school, all that kind of stuff. You need a car. And so let's talk about those individuals that might have a tough time, right? Whether it's their buying power, financing abilities, those types of things. So we know, our partners at Credit Karma commissioned a study, and they found that, 32% of people who don't have a car, but they need a car, they can't afford one right now, right? The financing solutions options aren't there. We've all heard the news about the average new car price being about $50,000. But what also really, really is difficult, and what also we find that we must address, is the fact that almost half of them say that not having that car holds them back financially, which creates this vicious cycle. And so one of the things that we're embarking upon, which TrueCar actually doesn't necessarily have a history of doing per se, but as we build a marketplace to serve everyone, is critical for us, is essentially, helping these individuals to find the best car for them at the right price with financing solutions from dealers that will sell to them with financing partners out of that 1,500 I talked about that will give them a loan and a deal that will work for them, right? Ultimately, this is the goal that we're serving as a marketplace for this cohort of individuals, right? It changes as you think about other people. So what that means then ultimately is, number one, personalization of merchandise of inventory. We, through half a dozen clicks, we have a sense that you're a low FICO shopper looking for something affordable. We got to personalize the merchandise inventory for you. So we're showing you those cars. We're not wasting your time. We're not wasting the dealer's time. Yeah, you can shop and look at whatever you want. Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, how do we prioritize and lead you through this process, right? Empowering the customer during that whole shopping journey, helping them to answer questions, whether it's conversational commerce, specifically mapping out to them their buying terms based on their credit score. So you don't look at a generalized listing price, but you see what I would pay as this person. The full online transaction, which we're working on, which basically today through TC Plus, you could do pretty much everything until sort of like the final kind of wet signature of sorts, obviously. But we're working on that, so that'll be coming soon. And then ultimately, we do have nationwide car delivery today. And then also that post-purchase support and content, right? You now have this car, you're paying these loans. How do we help you through this process of owning this car and ultimately being able to afford it and maintain it? So what that also means then is not just the site experience itself, the data we're collecting and how we marry those together to the consumer, but how we think about how we message to the consumer. And so this is also a new priority and a strategic initiative for us where Cox Automotive tells us it takes about 90 days, right? People are about the car market for about 90 days. So traditionally, ourselves and I think a lot of other folks sort of in the car marketplace platform world sort of look at the last sort of 7 to 10 days of the car shopping experience. Yes, there's tools and yes, there's content for earlier on, but at the end of the day, their business is driven by getting you to prospect, and not us because we don't have ads on our site, but potentially monetizing traffic obviously through ads. So listen, we were sort of very much in that place as well for the last decade or so. But as we pivot to a marketplace, you think about all of those other ones that I showed, they're really good at hand-holding you through a journey. Not a funnel, but a journey. And so for us, we think, a funnel implies that if you drop some out, you can get them back in. Again, on average, I think people buy about 2.5 cars every 10 years. So we're not exactly like buying jeans. So for us, we think about this journey because now what our focus is going to be is engaging everyone from as soon as you raise your hand and you signal to the internet, I'm looking to buy a car. We want to be there for you. We want to nurture that relationship, and we think TrueCar has the credibility and authority to do that based on all the differentiators I talked about before. So this is sort of how we break up our consumer journey, and we focus on every single part. So going back to that low FICO shopper, the discovery phase, I need a car. I need a car to get to work. I don't have a lot of money. What can I afford? What can I buy? What's out there for me? What's local? That discovery phase. TrueCar meets you saying, hey, we have large inventory for you. We have financing solutions for you. We hear you. We see you. We want to help you. We want to empower you, right? As you start to dial into sort of what that car may be and you have a few options, okay, well, for you specifically, here are your financing terms. Here's what we can offer you through our lender network. Here's who's close to you. Maybe we connect you to, through chat or to a dealer so that they can really help you in that regard. Consideration. So that's the marketing. And you're seeing this through CTV. You're hearing this through programmatic audio. You're seeing this on social, right? So we're now existing in this realm where we're going to nurture these customers through this journey. And ultimately, look, we want them to register. We want them to sort of create an account so we can support them in that way. And then we get into purchase, right? Which is just like, look, at the end of the day, you may not want to go into dealer. You may not want to go into dealer. And, in certain dealers, like, that support this type of a shopper, that experience may not be the best for you. You want to do it online and then just pick it up ultimately or have it delivered to you, you can do that, right? But with terms that you can afford that are specific to you and ultimately retention, right? How do we sort of maintain that relationship with you, which a lot of marketplaces do a great job of? We need to do that. And that's an area, to be honest, that we're focusing on that maybe we didn't really prioritize in the past. So I talked about the economic shopper. That's what we call this lower FICO shopper that is really important to us. And actually, honestly, as interest rates go up and the economy changes, that cohort may grow, honestly. And so we know we need to serve them. We know that they're a priority, and we actually don't know if they're that well served today, to be honest. So we feel that obligation and that goal of doing that. A convenience shopper we define as someone who higher FICO, they are looking to get through the journey. But for them, what's critical is key comparison tools, right? I'm comparing, CPO, like a CPO X3 to a lease Tiguan to, I don't know, maybe like a finance Q3 or something, right? But what are my landed costs at the end of the month for this car, right? And how do I get through this? And ultimately looking for just the convenience of shopping online. EV shopper. So listen, EV cars currently aren't like a large percentage of car purchases. We get it, but at the end of the day, we want to support this journey and this customer because there's a lot of ambiguity, there's a lot of questions. So how do we empower him or her to ultimately find the right EV, feel good about it, and do all that research online and then transact ultimately through us? So again, I'll finish by saying this, that like I've started by kind of saying, listen, there's something unique and different about every single one of these that we look at and that we ultimately comp against, and we think how to incorporate their strengths into what we're trying to do. But in reality, I think it's also what unifies them or what makes them very similar and what they do together really well all together. That is probably the most important thing to emulate, which is ultimately empowering the consumer through each of these journeys to feel like they're in control, right? They're in control of these things. And it's convenient for them. And so for us, ultimately, at TrueCar, that's our goal, is to empower the customer through these personalized journeys, through this individualized car shopping experience, to feel like I'm in control, I've got the right car from the right dealer on the right terms, and it doesn't matter who I am. It doesn't matter if I'm that 600 or I'm that 800. But at the end of the day, we need a car in this country, and ultimately, we want to be that partner and nurture that relationship through that whole shopping journey in the same way that those other marketplaces do as well. So yeah, thank you.
Could we get Slido up, please? Thank you very much. Maybe I could just kick off with a question from me. Traditionally, marketplaces, particularly cars marketplaces, have kind of been more on the side of the dealer than the consumer. How do you see that changing, or do you see that changing? And is that reflected in the kind of work you've been doing?
Yeah, so I did obviously focus a lot on the consumer in this presentation, but I think the dealer is obviously equally important to us. But here's the thing. We think that going through this journey, having people sort of personalizing these experiences will ultimately empower and support the dealer as well. Yeah, so it's one of these things where we think that if someone goes through this journey and they are, that's all right. I don't know if when someone goes through this journey and we have all this data on them and we're able to better sort of empower them to make these decisions, that's data and information for the dealer that we are confident will help them to close better.
And in areas like finance, clearly the dealer's got one set of interests in selling their own finance, et cetera. How do you balance that out? Are you going more towards the consumer now, or are you still?
So the good news. So of our network of 1,500 lenders and financing solutions, ultimately, we work with every dealer on the platform to understand who are their financing partners and solutions, and we have them within our network as well. So we're still working with the dealer on the ones that they've sort of whitelisted, so to speak, or approved, and then we're bringing others to them too, which is just to say, hey, here's other financing solutions we know that will unlock more demand and interest in your VINs. Partner with them, let us help facilitate that.
And so the consumer can choose those over the dealer finance, or are they kind of offered the dealer finance first?
So the dealer financing first.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, if those don't work out, we want to make a real concerted effort to find a solution that will work for all parties.
Okay. Yeah. Let's turn to Slido. Okay. And so top question, you might not be allowed to answer this, but what % of customers are using the off-ramp versus using TC Plus, and how many units have been sold with TC Plus?
It's a good question. So I appreciate the setup there, because I can't speak to that publicly now, but I will just say this about the off-ramp, is that ultimately that continues to be a massive priority for us. Like, we launched TC Plus, and if you check out TC Plus today, we launched it as kind of this contained checkout experience. So the off-ramp is something that we basically are doing a bunch of A/B tests on to see, is an off-ramp at every stage? Is it optimal at certain stages? And then also, how do we integrate conversational commerce and chat into some of those key areas? If essentially when you get to the F&I stage, these types of things. So I don't want to sound like I'm evading the question, but I can't really say the specific numbers. But it is something that we're obviously focused a lot on. But through optimization and A/B testing of sort of when's the best place for people to come off the experience, if they want to.
But as you look to the longer term, do you feel that it's going to become the dominant way of people doing it? Or do you think it's going to be a subsidiary part of the...
In terms of the off-ramp or the full online transaction?
In terms of the full online transaction.
So it's a good question. I would say dominant, assuming more than half of all car sales online, I think we're a ways away from that. And I think ultimately, if you look at different cohorts and generations, I think the percentages will change. But I think ultimately, this is why we need to build this and why we have been building this for the last 2 years now, is because we do think it will be a large percentage of car sales in the near future.
And so in terms of the building so far, what have been the biggest challenges to getting the new model running?
Yeah, I think one, it's sort of, look, at the end of the day, number one, it's like a lot of consumers still want to go to a dealer and kick the tires rather. It makes a lot of sense, which is why we are doing the off-ramps. So there's some aspect of that. But I think two, it's ultimately, it is a very complex process to buy a car. So we continue to iterate and make that journey better. There's people who are going through it now for sure, but it's a matter of iterating the journey so we cover all the labyrinth of all that, working with local state laws and regulations, especially some that require wet signatures versus digital, those types of things, working with dealers, adopting them. But the adoption as we expanded to more states, TC Plus, has been quite incredible. In fact, one of the major, I would say one of the main reasons dealers raise their hand to contact us is digital retailing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just one last question, we're out of time, so very quickly, but if the monetization system per transaction is better, why can't TrueCar have a large dealer base like CarGurus? Or phrasing it even a different way, are you inevitably going to then move out and expand your dealer base in order to make transaction stronger?
That's right, yeah. So 100%, the goal is that we will be expanding and growing that base of dealers. Look, at the end of the day, kind of COVID sort of threw a curveball for us in the sense that we were primarily new car, like a lot of focus on new cars, which obviously with the inventory shortage, that sort of changed the tenor of that conversation. But now as we come out of it, our head of the field team, Jay Neiman, is out there, pounding pavement and growing that. And I think what's so exciting is the fact what I just said to you before, that dealers are coming to us proactively, raising their hand and said, I want TC Plus. How do I get in that? I need a digital retailing solution. Yep. I know that's the future of things. And so we're really lucky to have built that over these past few years now to have a solution to offer them. So we feel good about that. We feel like we're going to grow, and actually, in all honesty, we've been growing that quite aggressively.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much.
Of course. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Let me.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Thanks.
Cheers.